So I just want to tell you something about this book before they begin. I actually saw this book before I ever met Simon and Devon. I saw a bright green color pop out from a bookshelf in an office that wasn't mine, and I thought, wow, that looks like just quite an interesting book. What is that? And it instantly appealed to me. And I went close and I thought, oh, green, sustainability, that's really up my alley. Being obviously working here, you would imagine. And I pulled it out and I thought, I would really love to read this. And just a while later, I got an email from, I think it was either Simon or Devon, can't remember exactly, saying, can I come over to the hotel, introduce this book to you, and meet up and talk about how we can collaborate. And so they came and they showed the book and I said, no ways. This is actually the same book that just 2 weeks earlier popped out at me and grabbed my attention. And I think that is a real testament to the type of book that it is. It's attention grabbing, and I really believe that it's going to be a true resource for sustainability going forward. A comprehensive one, and something that Hotel Verde is really, really proud to be a part of the journey. And so, without further ado, I just wanted to welcome you on behalf of Hotel Verde. By the way, my name is Sarah. I didn't mention that. Hello. So come chat to me afterwards if you're keen. But yes, I just want to introduce these very fine authors, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I know that you will.
Great. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot to us to have you all at this really great event. So thank you to Sarah and the whole Hotel Verde team for putting this together for us. I think I really want to get into the ins and outs of why Devon and I wrote this book, what is our motivation, and what we're hoping to achieve through it. But we just want to start by just giving you a run through some of the discoveries we made while writing it, and some of the things that led to our convictions about the necessary nature of this book and why we feel it should be in people's hands. So, to start off with, I thought we could play a bit of a game, and I know that, and we're all very aware that there's a very severe drought happening in our country at the moment, and I think that we're all trying to do our best to find ways to save water. And we're very conscious of the way that we steward this very, very precious resource. We are a water-scarce country, and I think that we often fail to really recognize our food and how much our food uses water to grow. So I thought we could play a game just to guess. When it comes to saving water, when it comes, what kind of foods take the most water to grow and be produced and end up on our plate. So I'd love people just to throw out some numbers just to guess how much water you think is needed to produce 500 grams of carrots. Speaking of water for a second, thankfully we have water here, because when we first gave a presentation like this, Devon left his water on the other side and had a mark with a cord, and was so in there, so in the zone, giving his presentation, and then he decided to go take some water, ran over and almost pulled down the entire school. But thankfully it managed to reset and balance itself, but it made for a good icebreaker. But back to this, okay, carrots. 500 grams of carrots, it's like a normal portion. How much water do you think it takes to produce?
5,000 liters.
Come on guys, come on. 100.
2 liters.
2 liters.
Oh.
Yeah. Then from the moment that seed goes into the ground to growing and to producing that 1 carrot. So apples?
250.
Chicken?
It's 2,500.
She knows her stuff.
Almost
2,000 liters of water to produce chicken. Bread?
1 liter.
No. 500 grams of chicken. Bread, anyone?
500 grams of
500 grams of bread.
950 liters.
Pork?
3,000.
Yeast.
8,000.
Nearly 20,000 liters to produce. Our animals, our livestock is a very inefficient source of food. And as you know, California is going through a very severe drought, much like ourselves. And there's campaigns going around to help people really recognize, their daily consumption of water. And this is a very, very smart ad that came out. That was a huge shock to me. And it says, if you want to save 1,300 gallons of water, don't flush your toilet for 6 months. Don't take a shower for 3 months. Or for lunch, just don't eat 1 burger. So I think this stands as a really big eye-opener to how often uninformed we are about sustainability and the issues of conserving resources like water and everything else that goes with it. So I thought that just to start off, I would do a little story on our background as to how we got to where we are today. And if you look at just the trends in human population urbanization over the last 100 years, you can see that as human population has increased, so has our relationship with cities and urban environments. So much so that for the first time in human history, we had more people living in cities in 2008. It was literally the breaking point. We have more people living in cities than rural areas. Now that has vastly huge implications on the way we live our lives, but also our relationship to the environment. This is actually a map of Asia. And if you look at 2,000 years ago, human impact on the planet was very minimal. Our relationship to cities was very minimal. Cities played a very small part in human daily life and our relationship to the world around us. You can see the largest city at the time was Rome, with only 500,000 people. Now it took centuries for cities to reach the point of having 1 million people occupying them. In 1950, we had 10% of the world's population living in cities, with the largest being that of New York. As the trend continued, today we have more than 50% of all humans living in cities, with the largest cities reaching well beyond 20 million people in places like Mumbai, Shanghai, and Tokyo. And if this trend continues, by 2050, that's only 35 years from now, we're going to be seeing 75% of humans living in cities. That's 3 out of every 4 people living in cities. This has a drastic transformation on our societies, but also our relationship and impact on the environment around us. So consider this picture. This was Manhattan Island 300 years ago, and that's Manhattan Island today. Now you can see the kind of impact we're having, and it's both a great groundbreaking achievement for mankind and human progress, but at the same time you can see what a large impact we're having in our cities, we're having on the environment through our cities, the way we're absolutely transforming the world around us. You know, geologists call the age we're living in now as the Anthropocene era. Now, they divide the history of the world up into different phases and usually name it after the thing that had the most impact on the climate, on the very shape of the world, on our geology, on species, etc. And you know, we're living in an age now where they say that humans are the greatest force of change in our world today. If you look at everything from rising sea levels to the weather patterns that are changing due to climate change, if you look at species extinction and pollution, humans are the greatest influence in our world today more than anything else, which is quite a drastic thing to think about. If we just take this over to the east, where China is, and as we know, China has been going through a rapid time of industrialization, urbanization, the last couple of decades. So much so that there's an area around the Pearl River Delta where they're trying to merge 9 cities into one, causing an extensive urban landscape of 25,000 square meters of pure urban living. So you're seeing the combination of cities like Hong Kong, of Guangzhou, of Macau, all merging into one extensive, uninterrupted landmass of human population and settlement. Now, this is a scary statistic, and both a mind-boggling one as well. If you look at this, China in the last 3 years has used just as much cement as the US has used in the last 100 years. Now, if you think of the amount of water and natural resources, human energy and effort that's gone into this, this is absolutely outstanding. Now, if you were to take this home for a second, just to the African continent, currently Africa has a population of 1.2 billion people. Now, that's going to accelerate to double the amount in the next 35 years, with 60% of people in Africa living in cities. Now, in light of that, currently cities consume 75% of all energy and resources, which means that we produce 75% of all greenhouse gases and 75% of all waste. And so small changes in the way that we live, through our transport, through our occupation of buildings, through the food we eat, has a drastic influence on our overall impact on the planet. So currently we live in what we call a very linear throwaway economy, where we extract resources from the earth, we manufacture them into goods and services, and we dispose of them and throw them away. Now, it's very straightforward, it's very linear, but I think we we often don't consider where away really is. So when you throw things away, where exactly is away? This is away. This is the North Pacific Gyre. All the currents in the Pacific circulate around this one area where everything gets deposited. This is an area twice the size of Texas or twice the size of South Africa. There's a gyre both on our coast, the Indian Gyre, and there's the South Atlantic Gyre. And this is where the world's plastic goes. Currently, there are, in the North Pacific Gyre alone, there's 3.5 billion tons of plastic. So we throw things away, that's pretty much where it's going. And it looks like that. Scientists have actually studied this part of the ocean and found that there's more plastic than plankton. This is something I actually discovered just a few weeks ago, actually, that in the US and in Europe, they've made exfoliating face washes illegal. I mean, I used this when I was younger. I think we've all been exposed to products like this. And if you know about these products, they have these small things called microbeads in them. So that's plastic. And, you know, we wash our face and it all goes away down the drain, but where does it end up? And it ends up in our oceans. Now, those microbeads are exposed to marine life, who generally swallow it and can become sickened by them. And that's why it's been outlawed in the US and in Europe. And now there's huge pressure on the British government to do the same. So another issue of waste is atmospheric waste. You know, there's so much noxious gases being given off by our landfills, by our unsustainable methods of transport, by our energy resources, that we start to consider where a way is, but there is no way. It all gets trapped in our atmosphere. So this number here is hugely significant, and I'll reveal to you what it's representing in my presentation. But if you think of something like 21,000 people, that's a rather large number of human beings. It's hard to even really imagine. But that is the amount of hunger-related deaths we experience daily. And now, if I were to ask you, you know, why does this occur in our world full of convenience and abundance? Most people would assume that we don't produce enough food to feed the world. But the truth of the matter is that we actually have, being a population of 7 billion people on the earth, we actually produce enough food to feed 10 billion people. Yet it's not a matter of supply, it's a matter of accessibility. 60% of the food we generate is wasted between the farm and the fork. Now, if you don't mind, I'll use these biscuits here to explain what happens between the farm and the fork. So, we as a society produce, say, 9 biscuits of food. 3 biscuits get lost on the farm. That's just due to poor farming methods, poor infrastructure, outdated ways of farming. That gets wasted. 3 out of 9 parts of our food are wasted. Another 3 go to feeding livestock. Now, our animals, as I mentioned before, are hugely inefficient sources of food. And of those 3 that they consume, they only give back 1 part of food. The other 2 are turned into heat and feces and energy. So we're left then with 4. 4 out of 9 biscuits. Now, if you're asking, it's a hugely inefficient way to generate food and feed the masses. So we need a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching these sort of problems. And if you look at just the waste on the fork, this is an example of a bread factory in the United States which wastes 13,000 pieces of bread daily, because that's the end of the bread which no one wants to have on their sandwich. But that goes into the trash, into a landfill. It's completely wasted, instead of seeing this as a potential resource. So in light of this, you know, the question to ask is, you know, what does make a city sustainable? We consider the importance of cities and the impact that they have not only on our daily lives but on the world around us. And if I were to ask you, you know, what makes it a sustainable city? What are the key elements that drive that? You know, we would think of things like, you know, do they have a recycling economy? What is their waste reduction like? What is their approach to conservation and ecology? What is their approach to clean energy? Do they have a clean energy program? How much does it contribute to the overall energy usage? Do they have a sustainable transport system? And what is their approach to urban density? Now, if I were to ask you, what do you think the most sustainable cities in the world are? What would you guys say?
India.
As a city?
Oh, okay. Sorry,
India, you have Mumbai, you have
I know it's
like
a
Delhi.
sustainable country. I don't know which city though.
Andre?
Why are you picking on me?
Quebec.
Heidelberg in Germany.
Denmark.
Okay, these are the most considered by the UN the most sustainable cities in the world, based on the list of factors that I mentioned prior. Copenhagen, London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, cities similar to them in similar regions. And now that's what's happened in these cities, that they have a completely different approach to our relationship to environments, to our way of disposing waste, of consuming food, of generating energy. And now, you know, we can think, okay, these are all first world countries. Every single one of these cities and the countries they live in, you know, they've overcome obstacles, they're first world, they can afford the luxury of being sustainable. But, you know, this is, while this is largely true in some parts, I think that in third world countries, in developing countries, much like South Africa, there's huge opportunities to deal with the existing problems we face in a way that actually has a long-term strategy to it, a way that solves the current problems in a way that both benefits us economically, socially, and environmentally. And I'll use an example of a city called Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. And Colombia is a developing country, much like our own. The city itself has a population of over 10 million people. I mean, our largest city is Johannesburg, which has something like 4.5 million. And in the year 2010, it had the top three highest. It was one of the highest traffic-oriented cities in the world, alongside Lagos and Los Angeles. And we think that the traffic we had on the N2 getting here was bad. This is probably a daily circumstance that we're wrestling with. There's a huge amount of pollution being generated, which leads to issues such as depression, health problems, and environmental depletion. This is Bogota in the year 2000. That's a lot of traffic. So, yeah, it's enough. So in the year 2000, there was a campaign to elect the new mayor of the city. There were 5 candidates running for mayor, and the panel put this photo in front of them and asked them, how do you plan on solving what is one of our biggest challenges at the moment in the city? How do you plan on solving this? 4 of the 5 candidates said, we can add 3, 6, 7 more lanes to this to solve the problem. And there was one chap, 1 out of 5, who said, no, my strategy is to reduce this by 3 lanes. Most people laughed and said, you're crazy, how's that going to solve anything? But he had a strategy in mind. Despite criticism, thankfully he was elected mayor. And this was his solution. This is the program that inspired the My City bus system. His plan was to reduce the highway by 3 lanes and put in a top-performing, efficient bus system to transport the city's inhabitants. Now, if you look at it from just a social and economic point of view, the poorest people in the city, up until this, had to rely on really potentially dangerous, informal ways of getting around from home to work. And generally living on the outskirts of the city, you develop something called transport poverty, where huge amounts of their salaries and wages go to just simply getting from A to B. Now, this is a form of democracy where you are democratizing the city transportation network. And you can see the benefits that this has had to the My City bus, or the My City bus system has on the city of Cape Town, and how it's been such an advantage to us. So this has alleviated traffic, it's improved the well-being of the city and its inhabitants, and it's reduced the amount of carbon and greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere. So in light of that, I think that's just a really shining example of a shift in thinking. And this shift in thinking is something that Dev and I are really trying to advocate. You know, up until now, the whole environmental movement has for a long time been orientated around a sort of doom and gloom approach that adapts or die, where, you know, it's a real struggle to go the route of environmental sustainability, but we want to see it as an opportunity to solve our problems in a different way that can actually enhance well-being, enhance our human lifestyles. So I just want to hand over to Devin on that note. He's going to continue this lecture, or presentation, should I say, to university. You know. Continue this presentation, looking at examples of the shift in thinking that we're trying to advocate.
So this is a photo that was taken at COP15, which was the climate change negotiations in Copenhagen in 2009. was poised to be the turning point in the climate crisis, where we came up with a solution, a pathway, a strategy, if you want to call it. But if you look at the facial expressions from Barack Obama, Angela Merkel, that blonde lady in the background, and the overall atmosphere of the room, it certainly wasn't a party. And COP15 was an overwhelming disaster. If I have to quote The Guardian magazine, it was the best that came out of it was a weak political statement. Now, if you fast forward 6 years to last year, this is a photo from COP21, which were the climate change talks in Paris. And it wasn't successful, and there's still work to be done, but it was certainly more successful in 2009. You know, we set a strategy going forward, and it fundamentally comes down to a change in thinking, because in 2009, what the general mindset was, how much of our existing quality of life are we willing to sacrifice in order to turn our economies into something that's sustainable? Whereas here, we had a completely different mindset that was more positively oriented. So Simon mentioned the term hedonistic sustainability, and for those of you that heard our interview earlier, we discussed this. And this fundamentally says that sustainability doesn't need to be an inconvenience or sacrifice. We certainly can achieve a level of sustainability whilst at the very same time improving our quality of life. And I don't want to make this about theory, so I'm going to take you through 5 case studies, practical case studies to illustrate this point that I'm discussing. So the first case study takes us to Copenhagen again. And you've heard that name many times tonight, and there's still more to come. But about 20 years ago, Copenhagen realized that they needed to make their city sustainable, and transport was a challenge. And in order to turn their city sustainable, they wanted to implement bicycle infrastructure. So they spent millions of euros having allocated bike lanes into every single street in the city. And you know the conventional layouts of road, you've got the cars in the middle, you've got the bicycle lane, you've got your parked cars, and then you've got your pedestrian walkway. And that's the same pretty much all over the world. Cape Town's got the exact same. And once they implemented this, they expected an increase in cyclists in the city, and there wasn't anything. No, maybe 2.5% increase. And they did surveys, and they determined that people perceive cycling to be unsafe, which again is the case pretty much all over the world. And so they widened the cycle lanes, and yet again it was ineffective. Until someone came up with an ingenious idea, which was to change the design of the road. So what they did is they just changed things around a bit. So now instead of having the middle of the road, then the bicycle lanes, they had the moving cars, then the parked cars, then the bicycle lane, and then the pedestrian lane. And what that did is that allowed the cyclists to perceive cycling to be safe. They said, now we're not protecting the parked cars from moving cars, the parked cars are protecting us from moving cars. And within 5 years, cycling doubled. There's actually a problem that there's too many cyclists in Copenhagen. So now what they do is they've got to figure out how to accommodate for the increase in cyclists. This is an image of, it's actually Dubai. Dubai. And I get quite worked up when I talk about Dubai because, anyway, I'll get to it. But I was fortunate enough to go to Dubai last year, and you step out of the airport and it's just so car orientated. And it's disappointing because here was a city that has literally been built in the last 30 years. It literally has. And yet it's used an outdated 20th century building model to build the city. It's sprawled. They're building glass skyscrapers in the middle of the desert. So what does that do? It magnifies the sun's heat. You've got to counter for that with air conditioning, which is highly energy intensive. They're building 8-lane highways. 20 years old, 30 years old, and it's one of the most sprawled out cities in the world. You know, when they built it, this was the general mindset of Dubai, pretty much. That epitomizes it. But then a change in thinking on the outskirts of Abu Dhabi, which is just 45 minutes from Dubai, is a developmental project called Masdar City. And Masdar City is a completely different, they're building in a completely different mindset to Abu Dhabi. It's dense, it's not car oriented, there's sustainable transport. The buildings provide shading for each other, all local materials used, very much facilitates social connections, social interactions. It's about the people, it's about carbon-free transport, and this is just on the outskirts, so it can be done. Here's a photo. Those are incredible shading devices that open and close automatically with the sun. So you can see it's very much a city-like and not that sprawled out, car-orientated. The Copenhagen harbour baths. So like most cities that have a harbour, the harbour 15, 20 years ago in Copenhagen was highly polluted, the water, very contaminated. All the factories around were throwing away their discharge and contaminants, and there were no fish, and it was a health hazard for the city inhabitants. Change in mindset. The city officials said, let's clean up the harbour so we can turn something that's bad into something that's good, and they spent money and they rejuvenated water. They cleaned it up so much now that the fish population are back, and up to 10,000 Copenhagen inhabitants use the harbour baths as a beach every single weekend. This is one of my favourite examples, and I think there might be one or two of you in the room here that have actually visited this. So this is a photo of the New York High Line. It was a railway that was constructed along the west coast of Manhattan Island in the early 20th century. By 1980s, it was decommissioned. No one was using it. It was due for upgrades, which are a huge investment. It was dilapidated, decaying, area of crime, hotspots, drug deals. And so the city said, okay, we need to tear this down. But New York was going through economic tough times in the 1980s, so they never got around to it. And then in 2009, the inhabitants of the city said, listen, we've had enough. We need something to be done about the High Line. It's bringing the value of the neighborhood down. There's so much, it's attracting crime. It's just an eyesore, really. So they were going to destroy it. And then someone came up with the idea. They said, listen, all the energy and the labor and the materials that we used to construct this are still locked up in there. And there's still an opportunity that we can turn this into something good. And so they developed the New York High Line. It's now a 7-kilometer public park, suspended 10 to 15 meters above the streets of Manhattan. Uninterrupted, splendid views, cafes, they've got benches, they've got yoga classes. Again, this has improved the quality of lives of city inhabitants just by changing their mindset. Something that was going to go directly to landfill is now benefiting the city inhabitants. Onto fruit, food. This is a campaign from France, and many of us, we demand perfection from our foods. When we go to the grocery store, we pick up an apple, and if it's not red enough, then we put it back. If it's not the right shape, if there's any form of abnormalities, we put it back. But it turns out that up to 20% of the fruit that's grown doesn't even make it into the grocery stores because they don't meet those strict specifications from the grocery stores. So a grocery chain in France realized that they were actually losing a lot of revenue from these foods that they weren't accepting. And they came up with a fun campaign called the Weird Fruits and Vegetables. And what they tried to do is they wanted people to get over the stigma that just because an apple doesn't look like an apple doesn't mean it's not an apple. And so they come up with these things. The ugly carrot in a soup, who cares? The grotesque apple a day keeps the doctor away as well. And it was an overwhelming success. And basically, the supermarket increased their revenue, their fruit revenue by 25%. People really took onto this and they grasped the idea. They loved it. There were markets specifically designed for weird fruits. And there was competitions. Whoever could come up with the weirdest looking fruit. I think that one takes the cake. But I mean, if you think of it from a very practical perspective, that apple's almost double the size. You get double your money's worth. And yet, we perceive it to be something wrong with it. So I think in all of these examples, we need to change our mindset. And we need to go from what Simon mentioned, that linear throwaway economy where we extract, consume, and dispose, into something that's more reused, a reusable economy where there's no such thing as waste. Because if you ask yourself the question, what is waste? If you ask me, waste is a resource. Waste can be used as a resource. I'm writing an article on biochar production, and the amount of organic waste that we can use to turn into biochar is mind-boggling. And there's huge opportunities there. I mean, this is a great example, the Martian. I get told very often that looks like me. But it's not. But for those of you that have seen this movie, this is an unbelievable example of how waste can become a resource. Human waste, in this case, becomes a resource to provide with food. And it's just the idea behind it. So that brings us to the book. And I thought I'll spend a couple of minutes, just many of you are familiar with the book and you've read it. But I just wanted to give you just the fundamentals 101 of what we try to achieve. What our approach was, when we wrote the book, we realized that a lot of environmental resources out there, not all of them, but a lot, were very negatively framed. Education was almost a doom and gloom approach, trying to get people on board through guilt tripping them. And when we did our research, we realized that there's a huge opportunity with becoming sustainable. And as I mentioned, that hedonistic sustainability, and we really wanted to educate people on these issues. We wanted to write a book that was accessible, that was understandable when you don't need to be a professor or an academic in order to understand the issues at hand. we really wanted to make it visually appealing. We wanted to strike a good balance between a coffee table book and a textbook, so it still had the valuable content of a textbook, yet the visual appeal of a coffee table book. We wanted people to walk past and say, that book looks cool, I want to read it. We covered 5 industries: energy, food and agriculture, transport, buildings and cities, and consumer goods. And what we tried to do is we tried to educate people on the context, how we got to where we are in each of these industries. What is the problem with that, and what are the potential solutions out there? And we've got some books out there for sale, so for those of you that haven't got, please, we'd love to get you a copy. Here's just some images of the book that you can see. You can still see the balance between a coffee table and a textbook. And yeah, I'm going to end off with this very random and obscure image of Thomas Jefferson. And I was joking with Simon earlier, about 2 weeks ago I did presentations to over 3,000 school kids, and I didn't have this over here, and I asked them all if they knew who this was, I'd give them a book as a prize. And no one answered it, but I'm worried in this room someone might know the answer. So I decided to put the name there. But anyway, anyway, so why I end off with this, and I don't want to be too long, is, I know it's very random, but I think there's a very powerful and strong message behind this. And for those of you that know, Thomas Jefferson was 2-time President of the United States, consistently voted as one of the most popular. So he lived a remarkable life, he was a remarkable man, but this is what it says on his tombstone. And I'll read it out to you. It says, he was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and the father of the University of Virginia. Do you notice anything missing it? Can you imagine being the President of the United States twice? And it's not important enough to you to put on your tombstone. Can you imagine that? And it took us a while to figure out what he's doing here. And it turns out that he is recording his legacy. He's not recording what his job was. He's recording the things that he left behind for everyone else to enjoy. And I think there's such a powerful message behind that. And I speak for myself here, and I know Simon's with me on this one. When we were writing the book last year and going through tough times, and there certainly were tough times, trust me on that, there were 2 driving forces that really personally pushed me through to the end, the finish line. The one was because I really felt that there was a need for a book like that we were writing. I felt it was important. I felt that people that were highly educated were highly environmentally uneducated. You know, take my mom for instance, she's got 2 degrees, she's a highly educated, skilled woman, and yet she was unaware of many of the issues that we discussed in the book. So that was the first reason. But the second reason was that I had this image in my head that in 50 years' time I want to give my grandchild a book and say, this is the world that we lived in, this is the world that I was in. And I want to be proud that I was part of that generation that overcame that. Not because of the book that we wrote, but because I had my small part in getting us through that. And yes, it's the biggest crisis our species has ever faced. If you think of apartheid, that was South Africa. The American Civil Rights Movement, that was America. The French Revolution, that was France. This is a global crisis. And I think with that, there's a huge responsibility on our shoulders, but I also think there's a huge opportunity to be remembered. This is the same presentation that I gave this year. And Simon thought it would be funny to not take out the CEO at the bar when I spoke to grade 8. But, actually, it said let's drink because it was quite Durban book. But yeah, so from Simon and myself, we thank you all for being here. We draw a lot of inspiration from the work that you guys do. You're all pioneers, leaders in the field, so thank you for that. I certainly draw a lot of inspiration from everyone here. To Sarah and Hotel Verde, thank you for this. This is an unbelievable hotel, and it's so nice to see. It's refreshing to see a hotel that sees the same, very like-minded. You take the mindset that we believe we need to embrace, and you put it into practice in your core business model. So thank you for that. Thank you for hosting this event. If I've forgotten any thank yous, I apologize. But please, we'd love to chat to every single one of you. I know we've met a lot of you, but yeah, we'd love to see you at the bar. So thank you very much.